what if these ruins are precisely what they appear to be? The legacy of a lost, highly sophisticated global civilization. A culture that possessed a profound understanding of engineering, mathematics, geology, and the celestial cycles. A civilization that flourished in a deep antiquity we can barely imagine. Before a global cataclysm, perhaps the great meltwater pulse at the end of the last ice age wiped their world from the face of the earth. A cataclysm that plunged humanity into a dark age, erasing almost every trace of their existence, save for these indestructible stone monuments and the fragmented, distorted memories that would become our myths. Legends of a golden age, of Atlantis, of a time when gods walked among men. This is not a story of aliens. It is a story of our own forgotten potential. A story that suggests we are not the pinnacle of a single linear progression, but perhaps the inheritors of a cycle, a species with a profound and tragic amnesia. The survivors of this lost world, scattered and diminished, may have been the very figures who taught our more primitive ancestors the rudiments of agriculture and civilization. The Viracochas of the Andes, the Oannes of Sumeria, the sky gods of ancient myth. They were not gods. They were the last survivors of a world we have forgotten. This synthesis, this idea of a lost global civilization, is the one theory that connects all the dots. It explains the sudden appearance of sophisticated knowledge. It explains the shared architectural motifs and construction techniques found on opposite sides of the world. And it explains why every single one of these sites, from Göbekli Tepe to Tiwanaku, seems to be built with a skill and knowledge far beyond that of the cultures that later inherited them. We have stood before these ancient stones and asked the question, how? How did they build this? But perhaps we have been asking the wrong question all along. The evidence no longer invites the question of how, but demands the question of who. Who were these master builders? What did they know? And what message, what warning did they encode in these timeless monuments for a future civilization they hoped would one day have the wisdom to understand? The map of our ancient past is incomplete. There are entire continents of time missing from our history books. These ruins are the last remaining signposts pointing the way to a past far grander and more mysterious than we have ever been taught. The final answers do not lie in defending old dogmas, but in having the courage to follow this evidence wherever it leads, no matter how uncomfortable the destination. The secrets are out there, buried not only under the sands of Egypt or in the jungles of the Amazon, but deep within our own forgotten story. The quest is not over. In reality, it has only just begun. There is a story we are told from childhood. A simple, linear story of human progress. It begins with our ancestors huddled in caves, discovering fire, chipping away at stone. It follows a clean, upward path from nomadic hunter-gatherers to the first farmers, from mud-brick villages to the grand empires of antiquity. It is a comforting narrative, one that places us firmly at the pinnacle of a long, arduous climb, the inheritors of all that came before. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the timeline we have so carefully constructed is missing entire chapters, perhaps its most important ones? Scattered across the globe, etched into the bedrock of our planet, are silent monuments that whisper a different tale. They are the anomalies, the outliers, the impossible structures that stand in defiance of the history we have written. In the high deserts of the Andes, stones weighing hundreds of tons are joined together without mortar, fitting so perfectly that a single sheet of paper cannot pass between them. In the Levant, foundations exist that are built with megaliths so vast Our most powerful modern cranes would struggle to lift even one. These are not the works of simple, primitive peoples. They are the fingerprints of masters, the remnants of a science and an engineering that should not exist for its time. Mainstream archaeology works diligently to fit these square pegs into the round holes of our accepted history. They are attributed to brute force, endless manpower, and generations of trial and error. We are assured that with enough rope, ramps, and sheer human will, anything is possible. And yet, the questions remain, lingering in the shadows of these colossal ruins. Is that explanation truly enough? Does it account for the microscopic precision, the complex interlocking designs, the profound astronomical knowledge encoded in their very placement? Or does it simply mask a deeper, more unsettling truth? This is not a search for fanciful myths or tales of otherworldly visitors. It is a journey into a tangible mystery, guided by evidence carved in granite and diorite. A journey to the edge of our known past, to confront the echoes of a forgotten world, to stand before these enigmatic structures and ask the question that haunts the fringes of archaeology: what if we are a species with amnesia? What if the ruins that baffle us today are not the first dawn of civilization, but the last twilight of one that came before? To find the answer, we must travel to the places where history falls silent and the stones themselves begin to speak. Our journey begins not in Egypt or Mesopotamia, but thousands of years earlier on a remote hilltop in southern Turkey, where a discovery was made that threatens to rewrite history from page one. In the sun-scorched plains of southeastern Anatolia, a gentle, unassuming mound rises from the earth. For generations, local farmers called it Göbekli Tepe, the Potbelly Hill. They would occasionally find strange worked pieces of flint in their fields, but for countless centuries, the hill kept its secret. A secret that would, upon its discovery, send a seismic shockwave through our entire understanding of the ancient world. Because this was no ordinary hill. It was a tomb, not for a king or a queen, but for a cathedral, a temple complex that slept beneath the soil, guarded for 12 millennia. When the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating here in 1994, the academic world was completely unprepared for what he would find. Layer by layer, Schmidt and his team unearthed a series of massive circular stone enclosures. At the center of these circles stood colossal T-shaped pillars of monolithic limestone, some reaching nearly 20 feet in height and weighing up to 20 tons. The official carbon dating of the site was so shocking it was initially met with disbelief. The earliest layers of Göbekli Tepe were constructed around 9600 BC. Let that sink in for a moment. This is a staggering 6,000 years before Stonehenge was erected. It is 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. According to the established historical timeline, this was the Stone Age, an era of primitive, nomadic hunter-gatherers, living in small bands perpetually on the move, their existence dictated solely by the hunt and the changing of the seasons. The accepted archaeological explanation, therefore, is as revolutionary as it is simple. This was a sanctuary, a ritual meeting point, built by these very hunter-gatherers, a place for feasting, for ceremony, for the birth of organized religion. And for a time, this incredible, world-changing story seemed to suffice. It was a profound rewriting of history, suggesting that it was the shared need to build something sacred that brought humanity together, long before the invention of agriculture or cities. But the more we unearth from beneath the Potbelly Hill, the more this tidy explanation begins to unravel under the weight of profound and deeply unsettling questions. The first and most fundamental problem is the builders themselves. The sheer scale and complexity of Göbekli Tepe would be a monumental undertaking for an established agricultural society. So how does a society of scattered, non-sedentary hunter-gatherers organize such a project? A project that would have required hundreds of laborers working for decades, if not centuries. Who coordinated the quarrying of these 20-ton megaliths? Who orchestrated their transport over distances of up to a mile without beasts of burden or the invention of the wheel? Where did these hundreds of workers live? Who fed the masons, the engineers, the artists who carved the stone with such incredible skill? The conventional model of our past simply has no room for this level of social organization, of specialized labor, of long-term architectural planning, among a people who supposedly had no permanent settlements and lived hand-to-mouth. It is a logistical impossibility based on everything we thought we knew. This leads to an even deeper paradox that strikes at the very heart of human history. The long-held academic mantra has always been that agriculture came first. Humans learned to farm, which led to surplus food. This surplus allowed for permanent settlements, which grew into villages and then cities. Only then, with a stable population and organized society, could complex culture, religion, and monumental architecture emerge. Göbekli Tepe inverts this timeline completely. It flips the entire sequence on its head. Here, the temple comes first. This stunningly sophisticated sacred site precedes the invention of agriculture and permanent cities in the region by thousands of years. It's like finding a meticulously engineered microchip in a layer of earth dated long before the discovery of electricity. The implication is staggering. The immense coordinated effort to build Göbekli Tepe may have been the very catalyst that forced humanity to invent agriculture and settle down simply to feed the workforce. The temple didn't arise from civilization. Civilization may have arisen from the temple. So, if the mainstream narrative strains credulity, what are we left with? We are left with a structure that is profoundly out of place in time. Some researchers now suggest that Göbekli Tepe was not merely a ceremonial gathering place, but something more, a center of innovation, an astronomical observatory built to track the stars and mark catastrophic celestial events. Perhaps it was a kind of school, a central repository where sacred knowledge and shamanistic wisdom from countless tribes was gathered, preserved, and taught. Or does Göbekli Tepe represent something else entirely? A memory, an inheritance? Is it possible that the skills required to build this masterpiece were not invented here on the spot by primitive nomads, but instead were the last vestiges of a much older, more sophisticated culture? A culture that was lost to a global cataclysm like the Younger Dryas climate event, which coincides perfectly with the site's construction. Could it be that the builders were not inventing, but rebuilding, guided by the surviving knowledge of a forgotten ancestral civilization? This single site in Turkey is more than an anomaly. It is history's ground zero, a fundamental challenge to the linear, progressive story we tell about ourselves. It forces us to ask whether our past is not a simple straight line of development, but a far more complex and mysterious cycle of rising, falling, and forgetting. The hill has revealed its secret structure, but the true identity of its architects remains one of history's deepest enigmas. And yet, the mystery of who built this place and how may not be the most profound question it asks of us. The greater mystery may lie in what they were trying to say. For these are not merely stones. They are pages from a book we have only just begun to read. And the story they tell of strange beasts and cosmic symbols is even more astonishing than the mystery of their construction. They stand against the sky like the bones of a forgotten world, silent, monolithic, and impossibly ancient. Here on a man-made hill in southern Turkey, the T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe form a forest of stone, arranged in circles that defy the accepted timeline of human history. To walk among them is to feel the immense weight of a past we are only just beginning to comprehend. These are not crude standing stones. They are elegant, stylized representations of the human form, their long shafts serving as bodies with arms and hands carved in low relief, fingers wrapping around their fronts as if in solemn contemplation. And upon their surfaces, a silent lexicon, a frozen menagerie of terrifying creatures carved with an artist's confident hand. Scorpions, spiders, and slithering snakes, snarling foxes and powerful lions. Vultures, the ancient messengers of death, are everywhere. These pillars are more than just architecture. They are a library filled with a symbolic language that speaks to us across an abyss of 12,000 years, a message we are desperately trying to understand. Mainstream archaeology presents us with an elegant, if paradoxical, explanation. This, we are told, is the world's first cathedral, a ritual meeting point for the nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes who roamed this land before the dawn of settlement, before agriculture, before writing. According to this view, the sheer collaborative effort required to build such a monument was the very catalyst that sparked civilization. The need to feed the workers forced the cultivation of wild wheat. The need to house them led to the first villages. Göbekli Tepe, in this narrative, is not a product of civilization. It is its cause, a religious project of such magnitude that it fundamentally reshaped human society forever. And yet, the deeper we look, the more the stones themselves seem to reject this simple explanation. Hunter-gatherers? We are asked to believe that nomadic people with no knowledge of metal tools, no beasts of burden, and no permanent settlements somehow developed the complex social structure to quarry 50-ton megaliths, to transport them from the bedrock over hundreds of meters, and then to lift them into place with the precision of master engineers. This was not a small undertaking. It was a project that would tax the resources of even a Bronze Age kingdom, let alone scattered bands of foragers. The narrative inconsistencies go deeper. The art itself is a profound anomaly. Hunter-gatherer art, from the caves of Lascaux to the rock shelters of Australia, overwhelmingly depicts the animals they hunted: deer, bison, mammoths. It is a shamanic art, focused on the success of the hunt. But at Göbekli Tepe, the story is different. The animals carved here are almost exclusively predators, things that hunted man. It is a world of fear, of respect for nature's most dangerous killers. This is not the art of a people celebrating their food source. This feels like something else entirely, a message about power, about the cosmos, and perhaps about death. This is where we must leave the safety of established theory and begin to ask more profound questions. What if this was never just a temple? What if it was a celestial device? Researchers have noted that the central pillars of the main enclosures seem to be aligned, not to the sun like Stonehenge, but to the stars, specifically to the rising point of the brightest star in our night sky, Sirius.
Could the circles of Göbekli Tepe have been a vast astronomical observatory, a cosmic clockwork designed to track the slow, patient procession of the heavens? If so, the level of astronomical knowledge required would be utterly astounding for the supposed era. It would imply a long, continuous tradition of scientific observation stretching back millennia.
But another, more startling theory has emerged, one that seeks to translate the symbolism of one specific pillar, Pillar 43, known today as the Vulture Stone. It is a disturbing tableau. A scorpion sits near the bottom. Above it, a vulture, its wing outstretched, seems to hold a perfect sphere. And most chillingly, a headless human figure is depicted below. For years, it was thought to be a scene of celestial burial. But what if it isn't a collection of animals at all? What if it's a star map? Pioneering researchers have proposed that the animals on the Vulture Stone are not animals, but zodiacal symbols, representing constellations just as our own Leo the Lion or Scorpio the Scorpion do today. When you map these symbols to the sky using astronomical software, they correlate perfectly with the positions of the constellations as they would have appeared in our sky around the year 10,950 BC. It appears to be a date, written in the language of the stars. A date that corresponds with shocking precision to the onset of the Younger Dryas, the catastrophic climate event that plunged the Earth back into an ice age and caused mass extinctions across the globe. The headless man, in this interpretation, is not one person, but a symbol for humanity, for a civilization decapitated by a celestial cataclysm. If this theory holds true, then Göbekli Tepe changes from a temple for primitive hunters into something far more profound. It becomes a memorial, a warning, an encyclopedia in stone built by the survivors of a global disaster to preserve their knowledge of the cosmos and the memory of the day the sky fell. The sophistication on display would no longer be the birth of a new culture, but the desperate echo of a much older one. It suggests a lost chapter of our own story, a predecessor civilization that rose, fell, and left only these enigmatic stones as a testament to its existence. We are left with a structure that is both a masterpiece of engineering and a cryptographic puzzle. Its builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of engineering, art, and symbolism, and perhaps a terrifyingly precise knowledge of the heavens. They created this cathedral of secrets on the Anatolian plains, and for reasons we may never understand, spent centuries, perhaps even a millennium, building and burying these concentric rings of stone. Which leads us to the final, haunting question. If Göbekli Tepe was a time capsule, a message from a forgotten past, who were the messengers? And where did they go after they deliberately and meticulously buried their entire world under a mountain of their own making?
To stand within the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe is to feel the immense weight of deep time. The air itself seems ancient, vibrating with a silence that has lasted 12 millennia. Around you, monolithic T-shaped pillars rise from the earth like silent stoic figures, their featureless heads gazing out over the Anatolian plains. They weigh up to 20 tons each, carved and erected by a people who, according to our histories, should not have been capable of such a feat. Running your hand over their cold limestone surface, your fingers trace the outlines of figures carved with an unnerving artistry, a world of predators and prey, of strange symbols and otherworldly beings, all frozen in a silent stone tableau. They are more than just pillars, they are sentinels, guardians of a secret that has been kept for longer than civilization itself. According to mainstream archaeology, we are standing in the world's first temple. This is the accepted narrative, and it is in itself a revolutionary idea. It posits that Göbekli Tepe was a grand ritualistic center, a pilgrimage site for scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. The intricate carvings of foxes, boars, snakes, and vultures are interpreted as totemic representations of the natural world, powerful spirits or deities central to the shamanic beliefs of our early ancestors. In this view, it was the shared need to build this monumental cathedral on a hill that spurred humanity towards permanent settlement, agriculture, and ultimately civilization. Religion, they argue, was the spark that built the modern world. It's a compelling story, but it may not be the whole story. The problem is, the deeper one looks at the art of Göbekli Tepe, the less it resembles simple nature worship. There is a darkness here, a complexity that the conventional explanation struggles to contain. The animals are not depicted peacefully. They are often shown in aggressive, menacing postures. We see spiders, scorpions, and vultures, creatures associated not with life, but with death and poison. And then there are the humans, or what's left of them. One of the most common motifs is the headless man, often depicted in a state of death or vulnerability. This is not a simple celebration of the hunt. This feels like a narrative, a story filled with peril and cosmic significance that we have completely failed to understand. But the real challenge to the mainstream view comes not from what the pillars show, but how they are arranged. As researchers have mapped the enclosures, a stunning pattern has emerged. The central pillars of the most prominent circles, like enclosure D, appear to be aligned with specific points in the sky. Not just the solstices or equinoxes, but with the rising and setting of specific stars. Calculations suggest a potential alignment to the rising of Sirius, one of the brightest and most important stars in ancient mythologies across the globe. Why would nomadic hunters, whose lives supposedly revolved around the seasons on Earth, dedicate generations of labor to tracking the precise movements of the distant stars? It suggests a preoccupation with the heavens, a level of sophisticated, long-term astronomical observation that is profoundly out of place for this period in history. It suggests this was not just a temple, but an observatory. And within this observatory, there is one stone that may hold the key to unlocking the entire mystery. It is known as Pillar 43, but it is more famously called the Vulture Stone. At first glance, it is a dense collection of carvings, but some researchers now believe it is something far more profound. They propose that this pillar is not just a collection of pictures, but a celestial diagram, a date stamp. On the stone, we see a scorpion, an eagle or vulture, and other figures that correlate with known zodiacal constellations, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Libra. And above the vulture's wing is a single enigmatic sphere. According to this groundbreaking theory, the arrangement of these symbols is a precise map of the sky at a specific moment in time. Using archaeoastronomy software to wind back the stars, researchers found that the positions of these constellations on the stone perfectly matched the sky as it appeared around the year 10,950 BC. This date is not random. It is a moment of immense significance in our planet's history, the very beginning of the Younger Dryas, a catastrophic period of sudden, extreme climate change that plunged the world into a mini ice age for over 1,000 years. The cause of the Younger Dryas is still debated, but a leading hypothesis points to a cosmic event, the impact of multiple fragments from a disintegrating comet. Suddenly, the vulture stone transforms. The vulture, a universal symbol of death and rebirth associated with the sky, is not just a bird. It becomes a representation of the constellation Sagittarius, marking a point in the heavens. And the sphere above its wing, could that be the comet itself? The headless man at the bottom of the pillar is no longer a ritual sacrifice. He is a symbol for humanity, devastated by a cataclysm from the sky. The stone is not a religious icon. It is a memorial, a historical record of the single worst day in human history, etched in stone for all eternity. If this interpretation is correct, it changes everything we think we know about our past. The builders of Göbekli Tepe cease to be primitive hunter-gatherers fumbling towards religion. They become the survivors of a lost, sophisticated world. They become astronomers, scientists, and historians, possessing a profound knowledge of the cosmos and a symbolic language complex enough to record it. They emerge as a people so traumatized by a global catastrophe that they dedicated all their energy to building a monument that would serve as a library of that memory, a warning to all future generations to watch the skies. It implies a legacy of knowledge that is far older than the stones themselves, a body of learning passed down from an epoch we no longer remember. We are left, then, with a structure that is simultaneously a temple, an observatory, and a memorial to a forgotten apocalypse. Its pillars are not merely stone. They are the pages of a book written in a symbolic language we are only just beginning to decipher. A book that tells of a deep human antiquity, of a time when our ancestors possessed a sacred and terrible knowledge of the universe and of the cataclysms it can unleash. It was a message of supreme importance, a truth they believed had to be preserved at all costs, which makes their next action all the more baffling. If this place was the most important site on Earth, a testament to their history and a warning for our future, why then did they or their descendants spend the next 1,000 years methodically and painstakingly burying it all beneath a man-made mountain of earth and stone?
14,000 feet above the sea, where the air is thin and the light is unforgiving, the Bolivian Altiplano stretches out like a landscape from another world. It is a place of stark, desolate beauty. And here, scattered across this high plain, lie the ruins of a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. This is Pumapunku. The name means the door of the puma, but what you find here is not a door, but the aftermath. It is a sprawling, chaotic field of impossibly engineered stone blocks, looking less like an ancient temple and more like a high-tech superstructure that was torn apart by an unimaginable force and left to bleach under a silent sky. To walk among these stones is to feel a profound sense of cognitive dissonance. You see shattered slabs of gray diorite and red andesite, some weighing over 100 tons, strewn about like a child's discarded toys. Yet these are not simple blocks. They are complex, multi-ton components riddled with features that seem to belong to our century, not to the distant past. The mind struggles to reconcile the scene. It is at once a testament to breathtaking genius and utter catastrophe. There is no mortar, no simple stacking. There is only the ghost of a design so intricate, so precise, that it feels alien. This is not just a ruin, it is a crime scene. And the victim is our understanding of history itself. The stones of Pumapunku are a silent chorus, and they sing a song of impossible engineering. Mainstream archaeology, through diligent study, has provided us with a neat, orderly explanation for this astounding site. The official narrative places Pumapunku within the context of the Great Tiwanaku civilization, a pre-Incan culture that flourished in this region. The complex is dated to approximately 536 AD, a product of a powerful and organized state. According to this view,
The incredible stonework was achieved through sheer manpower and patience, using the primitive tools available at the time. Academics propose that armies of laborers, using nothing more than heavy stone hammers, bronze chisels, and the patient application of sand and water as an abrasive, worked these stones over centuries. The massive blocks were quarried miles away, somehow transported across rugged terrain, and then meticulously shaped and finished by hand. The H blocks, the site's most iconic feature, are explained as ceremonial objects, or perhaps the foundations of since-vanished structures. In this timeline, Pumapunku is the pinnacle of a known culture's achievement, a monument to human ingenuity using the simplest of means. It is a logical, grounded explanation that places the site comfortably within the established progression of human history. But then you look closer. You run your hand along a surface so smooth it feels like polished granite. You trace the edge of a groove so perfectly straight it defies the notion of a human hand. And the comfortable, mainstream explanation begins to fall apart.
Where a diamond is a 10, these stones rank between a 6 and a 7. The supposed tools of the Tiwanaku, stone mauls and rudimentary bronze chisels, are simply no match for this material. Trying to carve andesite with a bronze chisel would be like trying to cut steel with a blade made of plastic. The tool would be destroyed long before it left a meaningful mark on the stone. Yet the marks left on these stones are anything but crude. We see interior corners that are perfectly sharp, a feature notoriously difficult to achieve even with modern diamond-tipped tools. We see surfaces planed to a degree of flatness that is near optical in its perfection. And across these surfaces, there are no tool marks, none. No telltale signs of chipping from a stone hammer, no uneven scrapes from a dulling chisel. The finish is smooth, uniform, almost machined. Then there are the H blocks. These are not simple shapes. They are intricate, three-dimensional structures, each one a near-perfect duplicate of the others. They are covered in complex cuts, including interior right angles and interlocking slots that suggest they were components designed to fit together in a larger modular assembly. The idea that dozens of these identical, complex, 80-ton blocks were individually hand-carved with stone pounders is, to put it mildly, difficult to accept. The evidence screams of mass production, of a standardized template, of a technology that could replicate complex designs with an efficiency that should not have existed a millennium and a half ago. Perhaps most baffling of all are the drill holes. Dotted across many of the blocks are series of small, perfectly circular holes. Some of these holes penetrate deep into the unforgiving diorite. They are of a uniform diameter and exhibit a clean, consistent finish from top to bottom. This is the signature of a high-speed rotary tool, something that drills with immense power and stability. To suggest these were created by hand-twirling a stick with sand and water is to ignore the physical evidence staring back at us. The precision is simply too great, the process too clean. The stones of Pumapunku do not whisper of stone hammers and bronze chisels, they scream of a lost technology. So, if the mainstream explanation is insufficient, what are we left with? We are forced to step outside the comfortable confines of history and into the realm of radical possibility. One theory posits that the builders of Pumapunku were not primitive at all, but were the masters of a forgotten science. Perhaps they had discovered a way to soften stone using acidic plant extracts or advanced chemical knowledge to render the rock as malleable as clay, allowing it to be molded and then rehardened. This would explain the lack of tool marks and the almost fluid precision of the shapes.
Another, more technological theory suggests the use of advanced tools, perhaps sonic or ultrasonic devices that could vibrate rock into specific shapes, or even a form of high-powered laser technology. While this sounds like science fiction, the physical evidence on the ground, the sharp corners, the flat planes, the drill holes, is more consistent with these futuristic methods than with any primitive toolkit. And then, there are the legends. The local Aymara people, who have lived in the shadow of these ruins for generations, have their own explanations. Their stories do not speak of the Tiwanaku culture. They speak of a time before, when the site was known by a different name and was built by a different people altogether. The myths passed down through generations state that Pumapunku was constructed by the creator god Viracocha, and that he did not build it with human hands. The legends claim it was built in a single night, the stones carrying themselves through the air to the sound of a heavenly trumpet. It was a celestial palace, a landing place for gods who came from the sky. While it is easy to dismiss such tales as folklore, one cannot help but feel a chill when standing amidst the ruins. The story of otherworldly builders, of an alien blueprint, feels strangely more fitting to the impossible evidence than the story of men with hammers and chisels. Pumapunku does not exist in a vacuum. It is perhaps the most extreme example, but the signature of its lost technology echoes in other ancient sites across the globe. It forces us to ask a terrifying question. Are we looking at the work of a single anomalous culture? Or are we seeing a single surviving piece of a global advanced civilization that has been almost completely erased from the pages of history? A civilization whose existence would shatter our modern timeline and force us to completely reevaluate who we are and where we come from. Pumapunku is not just a collection of strange stones. It is a fundamental challenge to the modern narrative of humanity's slow, linear ascent from primitive beginnings. It is evidence that, perhaps, our past contains a future we have yet to rediscover. The blueprint of Pumapunku remains an unsolved equation, an impossible geometry written in stone. Its shattered state may be a warning, its precision a legacy. But its origin remains one of antiquity's most profound secrets. But it is not the only place in these mountains where the very rock seems to have been bent to an unknown will, where stones of an even more colossal scale were fitted together not with precision cuts, but as if they were molded like living clay.
High in the Andes, overlooking the golden city of Cusco, a silent sentinel keeps watch. It is not a castle, not a fortress in any conventional sense, but a scar upon the landscape, carved with a purpose and a power that borders on the divine. This is Sacsayhuaman. Its name in Quechua is said to mean satisfied falcon, but standing before its gargantuan, zigzagging walls, one feels anything but satisfied. Instead, you are confronted by a profound and unsettling sense of impossibility. The walls are not made of simple bricks or quarried blocks. They are a cyclopean jigsaw of polygonal megaliths, some weighing over 125 tons, the equivalent of nearly 100 cars. They rise in 3 massive terraced tiers, snaking across the hillside for nearly 600 meters. The stones are andesite, a volcanic rock of incredible hardness. Yet they are fit together with a precision that is nothing short of breathtaking. There is no mortar binding them. There is only stone, shaped and joined so perfectly that in many places not even a razor blade can be slipped between them. The sheer scale is dizzying, the execution flawless. It feels ancient, eternal, and utterly alien to the world we think we know. So, how was it done? The accepted academic narrative places the construction of Sacsayhuaman firmly in the 15th century, attributing it to the Inca Empire under the ruler Pachacuti. The official explanation is a testament to human patience and brute force. Archaeologists suggest that an army of thousands of laborers, perhaps 20 to 30,000 men, worked for decades to achieve this marvel. The proposed method is known as scribing and fitting. A massive raw boulder would be hauled into place, set atop a finished stone. Then, with painstaking effort, the contours of the lower stone would be traced or scribed onto the face of the upper boulder. The workers would then lift the massive stone away, chip and grind at it with nothing more than harder river cobblestones and primitive bronze chisels, and then lower it back down to test the fit. This process would be repeated hundreds, perhaps thousands of times for a single stone. The polishing, they say, was done with sand and water, a slow, abrasive process that could take years. It is a story of incredible human ingenuity and perseverance, of an empire wielding its most abundant resource, manpower, to shape a mountain into a monument. And for many, that explanation is enough. It is a neat and tidy solution that fits within our established timeline of human capability. But stand in the shadow of these walls, run your hand over their impossibly smooth surface, and the neat, tidy explanation begins to crumble under the sheer weight of reality. The scribe and fit theory, while elegant in principle, presents logistical and physical problems so profound they border on the absurd.
First, consider the scale. We are not talking about small, manageable stones. The largest megalith here, the Monstero, weighs an estimated 200 tons. The quarries for this dense andesite rock are located miles away, across difficult mountainous terrain. How precisely did the Inca, a civilization without the wheel, without draft animals capable of pulling such weight, and without knowledge of iron or steel, transport these city block-sized stones? The theories of log rollers and massive ropes strain credulity when faced with the Andean landscape and the sheer friction involved. Then there is the precision itself. Look closer at the joints. They are not simple, straight lines. They are complex, multi-angled, three-dimensional puzzles. Some stones have 12 or more perfectly rendered faces, each interlocking flawlessly with its neighbors. You will see corners that are not 90 degrees, but gently curved, concave sockets that perfectly embrace the convex shape of the adjoining stone. This isn't scribing a simple line. This is mapping and carving a complex 3D surface with a level of accuracy that even modern computer-aided machinery would find challenging. To suggest this was accomplished by chipping away with stone hammers is to suggest you could carve a marble statue with a sledgehammer and achieve the finish of a Michelangelo. The tool simply does not match the result. And that is where the official story faces its most devastating challenge, evidence that cannot be explained away by manpower or patience. In certain sections of Sacsayhuaman and in other related sites across the Cusco Valley, we find something astonishing. The stones appear melted. Their surfaces are not chipped or hammered, they are vitrified, bearing a smooth, glassy sheen as if the rock itself was subjected to an intense, focused heat that turned its surface to liquid. Grooves and channels are cut into the hard rock with the smooth, flowing lines one would expect from a hot knife moving through butter. There are small, circular holes drilled into the andesite with the precision of a power tool, some with signs of vitrification around the edges. This is the smoking gun.
No amount of hitting a rock with another rock can create this effect. No amount of polishing with sand and water can vitrify stone. This is evidence of a technology, a process that is utterly absent from our historical records of the Inca. It is physical proof that something else was at play on this mountain, a force capable of manipulating one of the hardest stones on Earth as if it were soft clay. Faced with this impossible evidence, we must turn to where mainstream science fears to tread, to the legends of the people who have lived in the shadow of these walls for millennia. The Inca themselves, according to chroniclers like Garcilaso de la Vega, admired Sacsayhuaman, but did not claim to have built it all. They spoke of it as the work of a previous age, the work of giants, or of the Viracocha, the creator gods. Crucially, the local legends do not speak of hammerstones and bronze chisels. They whisper of a lost secret of the gods, a power to make the stones soft. Some legends speak of a liquid, derived from a combination of local plants, that could be applied to rock, rendering it malleable and easy to shape for a short period of time before it hardened again, stronger than before. Others describe a sonic technology, a tool or a voice that could emit a frequency that would temporarily alter the molecular structure of the stone, allowing it to be molded by hand. Are these just fanciful myths? Or are they the distorted memory of a genuine lost technology? A biochemical process or an advanced acoustic device would neatly explain the impossible precision, the curved joints, and even the vitrified appearance of the stones. It would transform the construction of Sacsayhuaman from a story of endless brutal labor into a story of profound and elegant science. It suggests the builders were not masters of manpower, but masters of physics. This pattern of evidence, megalithic scale, inexplicable precision, and signs of unknown technology is hauntingly familiar. It echoes the mysteries we saw high on the Altiplano at Pumapunku, the crisp, machined-like angles of the H-blocks there, and the soft, organic-like molding of the walls at Sacsayhuaman almost feel like two different applications of the same core lost science. They do not feel like the work of separate, isolated cultures. Instead, they feel like dialects of the same architectural language, a language that speaks of a precursor civilization, one far older and more capable than the Inca, whose legacy has been written in stone across the Andes for those with eyes to see it. We are left at an impasse. On one hand, a simple story of primitive tools and immense labor that fits our timeline, but not the evidence. On the other, impossible evidence and fantastic legends that point to a technology that should not exist. The stones of Sacsayhuaman hold their silence, their secrets locked within their glassy, perfect joints. They force us to question not only how they were built, but who built them. If the mastery over stone in the Andes truly points to a forgotten chapter of human ability, it begs an even larger question. What happens when we find evidence of this same impossible power, this same fingerprint of the gods, on the other side of the world? We arrive now at the heart of the Andean enigma, at the intellectual impasse where conventional history falls silent and the stones themselves begin to speak a language we have long forgotten. To stand before the ruins of Pumapunku and the Cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman is to witness a profound contradiction. The results of their construction are here, tangible and overwhelming, but the means are nowhere to be found. What we see with our own eyes and what our history books tell us are two completely different stories, separated by a chasm of impossibility. It is in this chasm that the greatest questions lie, pointing not just to a mystery of engineering, but to a fundamental misunderstanding of our own past. The story offered by mainstream archaeology is one of patience, perseverance, and brute force. We are told that the master stonemasons of the Andes, cultures like the Tiwanaku and the Inca, achieved these miracles with a simple toolkit. They wielded heavy diorite stone hammers to painstakingly pound and shape the blocks. They used bronze or hematite chisels for finer work, and employed wet sand and leather as a polishing agent to achieve smooth surfaces. To move these monoliths, some weighing more than 100 tons, they are said to have used immense teams of laborers, log rollers, and earthen ramps, dragging the stones for miles from their quarries. It is a narrative of human ingenuity and generational effort, a testament to what a determined society can accomplish over centuries. In this view, there is no lost technology, only lost time, and a degree of dedication that modern civilization can scarcely comprehend. But this explanation, while tidy, begins to fray and tear when held against the hard, unyielding evidence of the stones themselves. Let us begin with the material. The primary stone at Pumapunku is andesite, a volcanic rock that is incredibly dense and brittle. On the Moses scale of hardness, it ranks just below topaz and diamond. The proposed tools of the builders, stone hammers and bronze chisels, are significantly softer. Trying to carve precision channels and drill perfect holes into andesite with these instruments is not just inefficient, it is a physical impossibility. Bronze would blunt and deform almost instantly. Even the hardest stone pounders would risk shattering the andesite block long before shaping it with any degree of control. And the control we see is absolute. The H-blocks of Pumapunku feature interior corners cut to perfect 90-degree angles, surfaces polished to a mirror-like sheen, and channels so straight they appear to have been planned by a computer and cut with a laser. We find small, evenly spaced holes drilled in series, suggesting a technology akin to a modern power tool. The mainstream explanation of slowly grinding these features into existence with primitive tools simply does not align with the clean, precise, and confident nature of the work. There are no telltale signs of uneven pecking or gradual abrasion. The work appears to have been done quickly, flawlessly, and with a technology that left almost no trace.
At Sacsayhuaman, the problem shifts from precision to sheer, mind-bending scale. The trial and error method, the idea that workers would repeatedly lower a 100-ton block onto its neighbor, hoist it back up, shave off a bit of stone, and repeat the process for months or years, defies logic and physics. The pressure exerted by the megalith's own weight would pulverize the edges, making a perfect fit impossible. Yet, the joins are so tight that not even a razor blade can be inserted between them. Furthermore, some of these stones show signs of vitrification on their surface, a glassy sheen that occurs only when rock is exposed to extreme heat, causing it to melt and re-solidify. How could a pre-industrial culture generate the temperatures necessary to liquefy the surface of a multi-ton stone block? The official narrative provides no satisfactory answer. It asks us to believe in a process that defies its own evidence.
When faced with such a profound disconnect, we are forced to look beyond the accepted explanations and into the realm of what was once considered myth. The first and perhaps most grounded alternative theory involves a lost science of chemistry. Indigenous legends across the Andes speak of a time when the gods gave humanity a secret, a liquid derived from certain plants that could render stone as soft and malleable as wet clay. The explorer Colonel Percy Fawcett wrote of reports from natives about a bird living high in the Andes whose nests were made in solid rock. The bird would allegedly rub the rock with a specific leaf, and its secretions would dissolve the stone, allowing it to hollow out a space. Could these be folk memories of a genuine, forgotten technology? A powerful acidic compound or an advanced geopolymer formula that allowed the builders to cast these stones in place, much like we pour concrete. This would elegantly explain the perfect fits, the lack of tool marks, and the complex shapes found at Pumapunku. They weren't carving stone. They were creating it. A second, more radical theory steps into the unseen world of physics, specifically the power of sound. Again, legends offer a tantalizing clue.
Accounts from Tibetan monks, recorded by Western travelers, describe a ritual where a precise arrangement of drums and trumpets could create a sonic field powerful enough to levitate enormous blocks of stone up a mountainside. This wasn't magic, but an application of acoustic science, an understanding of resonant frequencies that has been utterly lost to our time. Could the builders of Sacsayhuaman have mastered a similar technology? Could they have used specific frequencies to neutralize the effects of gravity, floating these colossal stones from the quarry to the wall with ease? Perhaps other frequencies were used to vibrate the stone itself, allowing it to be shaped with minimal effort, or even to momentarily liquefy its surface, creating those vitrified, perfect seals. It sounds like fiction, but it is a hypothesis that, unlike the mainstream theory, actually accounts for the physical evidence we see on the ground. These theories force us to consider a paradigm-shifting possibility. What if the Inca, for all their brilliance, were not the original builders of these megalithic foundations? The Inca's own stonework, typically made of smaller, more manageable stones, is often seen sitting directly on top of these impossible ancient walls. The two styles are completely different. The Inca themselves did not claim credit. Their traditions stated that these sites were built by a much earlier race of giants, or by the creator god Viracocha himself, in a time before the sun. This suggests the Inca were merely inheritors. They found these sacred, awe-inspiring structures, recognized their power, and built their own empire upon the ruins of a far older, far more advanced, and ultimately forgotten civilization. The unanswered questions of Andean engineering are not perhaps questions about the Inca at all. They are questions about a predecessor culture, whose technological signature is written in the stones of the high Andes, a culture whose capabilities have been deliberately ignored, because acknowledging them would mean rewriting history itself. The stones remain silent witnesses, their secrets locked within their molecular structure. They present a choice: to accept a comfortable story that doesn't fit the facts, or to embrace the uncomfortable possibility that our past contains a lost chapter of incredible technological prowess. The evidence in the Andes suggests a civilization that had mastered chemistry, physics, and engineering to a degree we are only now beginning to reconsider. And if such a culture existed here, in the isolated heights of the mountains, where else might we find their footprint? What if we were to find evidence of the same impossible construction, the same inexplicable scale, but halfway across the world, on a sun-scorched plateau built for giants and for gods?
In the fertile expanse of Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, bathed in a light that seems as ancient as the stones themselves, stand the ruins of Baalbek. At first glance, it is a breathtaking testament to the might of Rome. 6 colossal columns, all that remain of the great temple of Jupiter, soar nearly 70 feet into the sky, the skeletal remains of a grandeur that once dominated the Roman East. For centuries, historians and archaeologists have marveled at this site, celebrating it as the pinnacle of imperial architecture, a project so ambitious it took decades of Roman ingenuity to complete. The scale is almost overwhelming, a clear statement of power from an empire at its zenith. And this is the story you will find in the history books, a simple, straightforward narrative of Roman engineering prowess. The official history tells us that here, in what they called Heliopolis, the Romans erected one of the most sacred sanctuaries in their entire empire. Beginning under Emperor Augustus and continuing for over 2 centuries, they poured immense resources into constructing a vast complex dedicated to Jupiter, Venus, and Bacchus.
They were, after all, the master builders of the ancient world. Their roads, their aqueducts, their Colosseum all stand as proof of their incredible skill. Baalbek, we are told, is simply the grandest of their achievements. It is a logical, well-documented, and universally accepted explanation. And yet, a persistent monolithic question undercuts this entire narrative. A question so heavy, it threatens to collapse the foundations of the official story itself. To find it, you must lower your gaze from the elegant Roman columns and look at what they are standing on. Look beneath the Roman stonework, beneath the ornate carvings and familiar imperial designs, and you enter a different age of engineering entirely. The entire Roman complex rests upon a massive stone platform or podium, and this podium is built with stones so enormous, so utterly incomprehensible in their size and weight that they make the impressive Roman work above them look like child's play. The western retaining wall of this platform contains the three most famous megaliths on Earth. They are known simply as the Trilithon. Each of these three titanic blocks of limestone is over 60 feet long, 14 feet high, and 11 feet thick. Their estimated weight is over 800 tons each. That is the equivalent of 3 Boeing 747 jumbo jets carved into a single, solid block of stone. And they are not sitting on the ground. They have been lifted some 20 feet into the air and placed with such millimeter-perfect precision that it is often impossible to slide even a razor blade between them. Let us pause for a moment and truly consider the implications of this. We are asked to believe that Roman engineers, whose largest cranes could, on their best day, optimistically lift perhaps 20 to at most 40 tons, somehow managed to maneuver and perfectly place blocks that were 20 times heavier. The logistical problems are staggering, bordering on the impossible. First, there is the quarrying. These megaliths were cut from a limestone hill about a kilometer away. What tools could Roman hands have possibly used to hew such gargantuan, uniform blocks from the bedrock? The precision of the cuts alone is baffling.
Then there is the transportation. How does one move an 800-ton object across a kilometer of uneven terrain, including a slight uphill grade? There are no records of any machine, any system of levers, rollers, or manpower that could accomplish such a feat. An empire that meticulously documented its military campaigns, its political appointments, and its civic projects somehow left no record of its single greatest engineering achievement. Not a single text, not a single frieze, not a single blueprint. Finally, and most inexplicably, there is the lifting. How were these blocks raised 20 feet from the ground and slotted into place with the seamless perfection of a master jeweler? It is a problem that would severely challenge our most advanced 21st century technology. We would need a coordinated array of the world's most powerful mobile cranes to even attempt such a lift. To suggest it was done with Roman-era ropes, pulleys, and wooden scaffolding is not just an appeal to ingenuity. It is an appeal to magic. And the problem, you see, only gets bigger. Back in the ancient quarry, a silent testament to this impossible engineering lies unfinished. It is known as the Hajar al-Hibla, or the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It is a single, quarried block, larger even than those in the Trilithon, weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. For decades, it was considered the largest worked stone in the world, abandoned in the quarry, we are told, because it was simply too heavy to move. It was the supposed proof of Roman ambition overreaching its ability. But in 2014, another block was discovered right beside it. This one is even larger, weighing an unthinkable 1,650 tons, fully quarried, perfectly shaped, and ready for a journey it apparently never took. Why would any sane engineer, Roman or otherwise, put forth the immense effort to carve these behemoths out of the earth if they knew they had no possible way of moving them? This is the colossal flaw in the official story. The math simply does not work. The evidence on the ground contradicts the accepted historical narrative. This leads us to a far more compelling and far more disturbing possibility. What if the Romans did not build the foundation platform? What if they found it here? What if they arrived in this valley to discover a terrace of impossible scale, the legacy of a much older and far more advanced civilization? A civilization whose engineering prowess has been lost to the mists of time. This theory suggests that the Romans, recognizing the sacredness and the sheer power of the location, simply built their own temples on top of this pre-existing ancient platform. It would explain the stark difference in scale and style between the podium and the temples. It would explain the utter lack of any Roman records for its construction. The name of the site itself, Baalbek, is a whisper of this older past, linking it to the Canaanite sky god Baal, long before Jupiter was ever worshipped here. Local Arab legends do not speak of Romans, but of giants or jinn who had the power to move these stones at the command of King Solomon. Perhaps these are not mere fairy tales, but a form of folk memory, a way of explaining a technological feat that seemed, and still seems, supernatural. Baalbek does not exist in a vacuum. Its impossibly large foundation stones echo the polygonal walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, the granite boxes of the Serapeum in Egypt. They seem to be data points in a global pattern, a fingerprint of a lost chapter of human history. The Romans were inheritors, not originators. They built upon a legacy they likely did not understand, a foundation that defied their own considerable skills. And this raises a far more profound question. If the Romans built their greatest temple on a platform they themselves could not create, were they paying tribute not only to their god Jupiter, but also to the godlike power of those who came before them? It forces us to wonder what else they found, and to question whether the true history of this sacred place has been hiding in plain sight, right beneath the surface of what we thought we knew.
In the sun-scorched Bekaa Valley of modern-day Lebanon, a monument to imperial power cuts a silhouette against the sky. This is Baalbek. At first glance, it is the pinnacle of Roman architectural ambition, a sprawling complex of temples dedicated to Jupiter, Bacchus, and Venus, built over centuries to project the might of the empire to the farthest corners of the known world. The sheer scale is breathtaking. Its columns are among the largest ever erected in the classical world, and the ornate carvings speak of a civilization at the absolute zenith of its confidence and capability. To stand here is to feel the weight of history, to walk in the footsteps of emperors and legions. The mainstream historical and archaeological consensus is clear, and for the most part, logical. Baalbek, known in Roman times as Heliopolis, the city of the sun, was a colossal construction project initiated around the reign of Augustus. It was a statement piece, a religious and cultural center designed to awe and inspire. Generations of Roman engineers, architects, and countless laborers would have toiled here, using the full extent of their legendary knowledge to quarry, transport, and assemble this masterpiece. They were, after all, the builders of the Colosseum and the Pantheon, the masters of concrete and the arch. The construction of a grand temple complex, even one of this magnitude, is seen as a natural, albeit extreme, expression of their well-documented abilities. Textbooks and official guides tell this story, a story of Roman vision and unparalleled engineering. But this story begins to fray at the edges when you lower your gaze. When you look past the elegant Roman columns and intricate friezes and inspect the very ground upon which they stand. For the Roman temples do not sit on bedrock. They sit upon a platform, a podium of such mind-boggling scale and construction that it makes the glorious Roman work above it seem almost temporary. This is the great enigma of Baalbek,
The foundation is built from a collection of megalithic stones that are, without exaggeration, among the largest and heaviest ever moved by human hands. The western retaining wall of this platform contains a course of 3 stones known as the Trilithon. Each of these monolithic blocks is estimated to weigh over 800 tons. Let us pause to truly comprehend that figure. A single 800-ton stone is equivalent to the weight of roughly 150 large African elephants, or 3 Boeing 747 airplanes. The Romans, for all their genius, have no known record of ever moving single objects of this magnitude anywhere else in their vast empire. Their largest cranes would have buckled, their methods strained to the point of impossibility. And yet, here they are, lifted more than 20 feet into the air and fitted together with a precision that is utterly baffling. The accepted narrative suggests the Romans quarried and moved these stones themselves to create a level and aggrandized platform for their temples. It is a testament, they say, to their supreme skill. But the evidence on the ground whispers a different, far more ancient story. There is a jarring, incongruous disconnect between the platform and the temple. The Roman architecture is detailed, ornate, and constructed from what we would consider large but manageable blocks. The platform below is the opposite. It is austere, brutally functional, and built on a scale that seems to belong to a different order of reality. It's as if a master watchmaker built a beautiful, intricate timepiece on top of an aircraft carrier. The 2 styles do not just differ, they feel as if they were conceived by 2 entirely different cultures, with 2 vastly different mentalities and perhaps 2 vastly different technologies.
This feeling is amplified when one examines the stones themselves. The megaliths of the foundation platform show clear and extensive signs of weathering. Thousands of years of wind and water erosion have left their mark, rounding the edges and scouring deep grooves into their surfaces. By contrast, the Roman stonework directly above it, while ancient, is comparatively pristine. Its edges remain sharper, its details more defined. Geologically, this is a profound chronological contradiction. It strongly suggests that the foundation platform is exponentially older than the Roman temple it supports, that it had already endured countless millennia of exposure to the elements before the first Roman architect ever set foot in the valley. The Romans, it would seem, did not build the platform, they found it. The questions then become staggering. If the Romans were not the builders, who was? At the nearby quarry, the mystery only deepens. Here lies the legendary Hajar al-Hibla, the stone of the pregnant woman, a single perfectly cut block weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. And deeper in the quarry, an even larger block was discovered in 2014, estimated to weigh a truly incomprehensible 1,650 tons. These were not accidents or natural formations. They're perfectly quarried, squared-off monoliths abandoned in the process of being moved. We are forced to confront a civilization that possessed the means and the motivation to handle building materials on a scale that would challenge even our most advanced 21st century heavy lifting technology. This civilization left no text, no name, no pottery to identify them. All they left behind was this silent, impossible foundation. This has, inevitably, given rise to theories that step far beyond the bounds of conventional history. The purpose of such a platform becomes the ultimate enigma. Why would anyone need a foundation capable of supporting a weight far greater than any temple? The sheer overkill is what fuels speculation. Ancient astronaut theorists have famously proposed that the Baalbek platform was never intended for a temple at all, but was instead a landing pad for extraterrestrial vehicles, a purpose for which its immense strength and flatness would be perfectly suited. Others suggest it was the base for a colossal energy device or a weapon from an antediluvian age, its true function lost to a global cataclysm that erased its creators from memory.
While such ideas remain firmly in the realm of speculation, they are born from the failure of the conventional explanation to account for the physical evidence. The stylistic differences, the geological aging, the unprecedented scale, and the complete lack of Roman records boasting of this singular achievement, all of it points away from Rome. It points towards a forgotten chapter in human history, a chapter where an unknown culture, operating in deep antiquity, possessed an engineering science that is lost to us. Baalbek in this light is not a Roman temple. It is a multi-layered site, a historical palimpsest, where the Romans were merely the latest civilization to arrive and build upon the sacred cyclopean work of their mysterious predecessors. We are left staring at a profound architectural riddle. The Romans built what they understood, a temple to their gods. But they built it on a stage that was created for a much, much grander play. What was the original purpose of this gargantuan platform? Who were the phantom architects who could quarry and move mountains with such apparent ease? And what colossal structure did they truly intend to build? A structure so immense that it required the very bedrock of the earth to be remade as its floor. The answers are not found in our history books. They are locked in the silent, eroded stones of the platform itself, a quiet testament to a power and a past we were never meant to forget. Perhaps the most profound evidence of our forgotten past doesn't lie on sun-scorched plains at all, but hidden in entirely different realms, far from the light of day. For some of humanity's greatest secrets were not built towards the sky, but were instead buried deep within the earth, or submerged beneath the waves.
In the vast blue emptiness of the Pacific lies the island of Pohnpei, a remote jewel of Micronesia, draped in emerald jungle and ringed by the constant whisper of the ocean. But on its eastern shore, something impossible rests, something that does not belong. Here, a city of ghosts is built upon the water itself. This is Nan Madol, a sprawling, dark metropolis of 92 artificial islets, crisscrossed by shallow canals, earning it the name, the Venice of the Pacific. Yet, there are no gondolas here, no songs, only a profound and heavy silence, broken by the call of a seabird and the hum of the ever-present humidity. The structures are built from colossal, prismatic logs of black basalt, stacked like a giant's firewood. Walls rise from the coral reef, forming tombs, temples, and residences of a long-vanished royalty. They are stark, alien, and mathematically precise. To wander its watery streets is to feel like an intruder in a forgotten dream, a place built by a logic we no longer possess. The scale is staggering. An estimated 750,000 metric tons of black rock, quarried, transported, and assembled in one of the most remote locations on Earth. It is, without question, one of the great archaeological wonders of the world. Mainstream archaeology, of course, provides us with a neat and tidy explanation. We are told that Nan Madol was the ceremonial and political capital of the Saudilur dynasty, a line of fearsome foreign kings who ruled Pohnpei from roughly the 12th to the 17th century. The official narrative suggests a monumental, multi-generational public works project. Over centuries, thousands of islanders, driven by religious devotion or royal decree, are said to have felled trees to build sturdy rafts. They would then travel to the other side of the island, to a volcanic plug where this unique columnar basalt was formed. Using nothing more than brute force, simple levers, and coconut fiber ropes, they supposedly maneuvered these multi-ton stone logs onto the rafts. Then began the perilous journey back to the construction site on the reef. Here, using earthen ramps and immense manpower, they painstakingly lifted and stacked the logs, one by one, year after year, century after century, until a city rose from the sea. It is a testament, we are told, to the ingenuity and unwavering resolve of the human spirit, a rational and perhaps comfortable explanation for an undeniable marvel. But as we so often find, when we look past the pages of the textbook and stand before the stones themselves, the comfortable explanation begins to crumble under an impossible weight. The logistics of this accepted theory are not just challenging, they border on the absurd. Let us first consider the source. The basalt quarries are miles away, across dense jungle and, more importantly, across open ocean. Modern engineers, looking at the currents and the sheer tonnage of the stones, some weighing over 50 tons apiece, have expressed serious doubt that simple log rafts could have even survived the journey, let alone supported such cargo. The amount of timber required would have deforested vast swaths of the island, an ecological price that the small population could scarcely afford. Then there is the sheer mathematical problem of labor. The population of Pompeii at its height is estimated to have been less than 30,000 people. The construction of Non Madol would have required a massive, dedicated workforce of thousands of men working for centuries. Who was feeding these builders? Who was defending the island? Who was performing the daily tasks of survival while the society's strongest were engaged in this Herculean, non-essential task? The numbers simply do not add up. There is no evidence of a slave class or a large-scale food surplus that could support such a project. It is a logistical paradox. And then, there is the construction itself. The walls are not crudely stacked, they are laid in complex, interlocking patterns, a style known as stretchers and headers, with a precision that is baffling. The stones seem to almost lock into place, fitting with an unnerving accuracy that simple brute force cannot easily explain. There are no tool marks on the stones, no evidence of chisels, metal or otherwise, and there is no mortar. The city holds itself together through a combination of sheer weight and an architectural genius that seems utterly out of place for an isolated Neolithic culture that possessed no written language, no mathematics, and no wheel. The mainstream view asks us to believe that a small population, using the most primitive of tools, undertook a project that would be a significant challenge for a 21st century engineering firm with cranes, barges, and computer modeling. It asks us to accept a feat of logistics and engineering that far surpasses that of many other, more celebrated ancient cultures. It asks us to accept a miracle of manpower. But when the official story fails to satisfy the evidence, we must turn to other sources. We must turn to the people whose ancestors lived in the shadow of this enigma. We must turn to legend. The Pohnpeian people do not speak of rafts and ropes. Their oral history tells a very different story. They say that Non Madol was built in a single generation by twin sorcerers, Olasipa and Olasopa, who arrived from a mythical western land called Katau. They were said to be taller and far more powerful than the local islanders. Using immense magical powers, they called upon the help of a dragon who flew through the air carrying the massive basalt logs and placing them precisely where the sorcerers commanded. The stones, the legends say, simply flew into place. Magic. A convenient dismissal for the modern mind, a word we use for things we cannot comprehend. But what if magic is simply a placeholder, a word used by an ancient people to describe a technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from the supernatural? This theme of acoustic levitation, of using sound, frequency, and vibration to manipulate massive objects, echoes in the legends of other megalithic sites around the globe, from the pyramids of Egypt to the walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru. The basalt of Non Madol is crystalline, prismatic. Could its very geological nature hold a key to a forgotten science of harmonics that allowed it to be manipulated, to be made weightless? It is a speculative leap, to be sure, but is it any more fantastic than the official explanation?
Another, more grounded theory suggests that Non Madol is far older than we believe. Perhaps the Saudalur dynasty did not build this city, but merely found it.
Perhaps they were the last inhabitants of a much more ancient structure, the last vestiges of a civilization whose true origins are now lost to the sea. This possibility forces us to zoom out from this single island and look at the broader Pacific. Is Nan Madol truly a solitary anomaly, or is it a clue? All across this vast ocean, we find traces of inexplicable construction. The great latte stones of the Mariana Islands, the inscrutable moai of Rapa Nui. These are not the works of isolated, disconnected tribes. They feel like the faint, dying echoes of a once great maritime culture, a seafaring civilization that possessed a shared knowledge of architecture and engineering, a culture that understood how to work with stone on a colossal scale. Perhaps Nan Madol is not the crowning achievement of a small island dynasty, but a surviving port of call for a lost pan-Pacific empire, a civilization erased from our memory by a great cataclysm or the slow grinding passage of time, leaving behind only these impossible, ghost-like ruins as evidence of its former glory, a single haunting data point on a map of a world we have completely forgotten. And so, Nan Madol remains, a silent, brooding city of stone and water, guarding its secrets with an impenetrable patience. Its existence is an affront to our neat timelines of history. It presents us with an uncomfortable choice. Either we believe in a miracle of primitive labor that defies all logistical sense, or we open our minds to the possibility of forgotten sciences and lost chapters of the human story. The stones do not speak, and the legends are dismissed as myth. The ghost city of Nan Madol stands defiant against the open sky and the endless sea, a monument to a power its builders were proud to display. But this raises a chilling question. What if other, contemporary cultures faced a threat so terrifying that their only recourse was not to build towards the heavens, but to flee from the light and disappear deep into the earth itself?
In the heart of Turkey, the region of Cappadocia presents a geological tapestry that feels alien, otherworldly. Here, the very earth has been eroded by time into surreal formations known as fairy chimneys, soft volcanic tuff sculpted by wind and water into a landscape of cones, pillars, and mushrooms. For millennia, humanity has carved its existence into this soft stone, creating homes, monasteries, and entire chapels hidden within the rock. But this surface world, as astonishing as it is merely a veil. It conceals a secret of such staggering scale and ambition that it challenges our understanding of the ancient world. Beneath the unassuming plains, accessible by what often looks like little more than a fissure in the rock or a simple well, lies another reality, an empire, built not toward the sun, but into the silent, absolute darkness of the earth. This is Derinkuyu. To enter it is to leave the familiar world behind. The air immediately cools, the scent of dust, of millennia of human history locked in stone fills your lungs. The narrow, sloping passageways pull you downward, deeper and deeper, away from the sky and into the heart of a profound and unsettling mystery. For here, an entire city unfolds, a subterranean metropolis of at least 18 distinct levels, plunging more than 280 feet into the planet. It is a labyrinth of tunnels, staircases, and chambers, a negative skyscraper burrowed into the ground. Archaeologists and historians tell us a logical, if simplified, story of its creation. They suggest its origins lie with the Phrygians, or perhaps even the older Hittites, who began excavating the soft rock around the 8th century BCE. Over time, it was expanded, most notably by early Christians during the Arab-Byzantine Wars, who used it as a temporary refuge from persecution and raids. And indeed, the evidence for this defensive purpose is everywhere. Massive circular stone doors weighing up to 1,000 pounds each stand ready in their carved-out slots. They could be rolled into place from the inside, sealing off corridors and trapping any invading force in the maze of tunnels. There are stables for livestock on the upper levels, vast storage rooms, wine and oil presses, and even a spacious cruciform church on the lower floors. The city was, by all accounts, a fully functioning, self-contained ark designed to allow a community to vanish from the surface of the earth at a moment's notice. It is, according to the mainstream view, a masterpiece of pragmatic, defensive architecture built and expanded over centuries in response to terrestrial threats. And yet, the deeper one descends into the cold, silent embrace of Derinkuyu, the more this simple explanation begins to fray at the edges. The sheer scale defies belief. Estimates suggest Derinkuyu could comfortably house 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. This was not merely a bunker for a few families. It was the hiding place of an entire population. The logistics of organizing such an exodus, of moving thousands of people and animals underground for what could be months at a time, is a staggering thought. The accepted narrative of it being a defense against intermittent raids seems insufficient. The scale of the solution feels utterly disproportionate to the stated problem.
The true anomaly, however, is the sophistication of the engineering. Consider the ventilation. The survival of 20,000 people underground depends entirely on a constant supply of fresh air. The builders of Derinkuyu engineered a breathtaking solution, a series of vertical ventilation shafts, some running as deep as 180 feet, that supply air to even the lowest, most remote levels of the city. These shafts are perfectly straight and attest to an incredible understanding of geology and airflow, a level of planning that seems far beyond the capabilities of a people simply digging reactively to hide from invaders. How is this achieved with primitive tools, without modern surveying equipment to ensure the shafts met their intended targets deep within the earth? Then there is the water supply. The city contains numerous wells, but they were intelligently designed not to connect to the surface. This prevented an enemy from poisoning the water supply from above. This feature implies a level of forethought that speaks to a long-term existential threat, not just a passing army. This was a structure designed for permanent survival against a persistent and knowledgeable foe. These features force us to ask a more fundamental question. Was Derinkuyu truly built to hide from other people, or was its original purpose something else entirely? The sheer depth, the incredible complexity, the long-term life support systems, they all point to a threat far more pervasive and enduring than a human army. This leads us to more speculative and perhaps more unsettling possibilities. What if the defensive features we see, the stone doors, the chapels, are merely later additions, renovations made to a structure that was originally far, far older and built for a completely different reason? Some researchers have theorized that Derinkuyu and the dozens of other underground cities in the region were not shelters from war, but from a cataclysm. A shelter from a threat that came not from across the land, but from the sky itself. Ancient texts from around the world, from the Hopi legends of the Ant people to the Zoroastrian texts of ancient Persia, tell stories of a great catastrophe that forced humanity to seek refuge underground. The Zoroastrian Vendidad speaks of the great king Yima,
who, under the instruction of the god Ahura Mazda, built a multi-level underground enclosure, a vara, to protect the finest examples of humanity, animals, and plants from a devastating global winter. The description of this mythical vara bears an uncanny resemblance to the structure and function of Derinkuyu. Could this vast complex be a remnant of a forgotten epoch? A survival shelter built by a prehistoric culture with advanced knowledge of coming celestial or climatic events like a solar flare or the devastating aftermath of a comet impact. When we place Derinkuyu in the context of other Turkish anomalies, like Göbekli Tepe, a pattern begins to emerge. We see evidence of incredibly sophisticated projects undertaken thousands of years ago that defy simple explanations. We are looking at a landscape that holds the memory of a lost chapter of the human story, a chapter where our ancestors possessed knowledge and abilities that have been written out of our official histories. Derinkuyu is not just a cave, it is a piece of evidence, a silent stone testament to a time when humanity faced a threat so terrifying their only option was to disappear from the face of the earth. The great city sleeps in darkness, its deepest secrets still locked away in the unexcavated levels. We are left with the chilling enigma of its true purpose, a city for 20,000 souls, engineered with a brilliance that is difficult to explain, built to withstand a terror we cannot name. The people of Derinkuyu sought refuge from a threat that came from the world above, hiding from the sky in the deep rock of the earth. But as we leave this empire of stone and shadow, our journey now takes us to a place where the opposite is true. A place where a forgotten world wasn't buried by earth, but submerged by water. We now travel from the depths of the land to the mysteries hidden in the depths of the sea.
Off the southern coast of Japan, where the East China Sea meets the vast expanse of the Pacific, lies the small island of Yonaguni. It is a remote outpost of jagged cliffs and windswept shores, known for its powerful currents and legendary hammerhead sharks. But beneath these turbulent waters, in the abyssal silence of the deep, lies something that should not exist, a sleeping giant of stone, waiting in the dark. In 1986, a local dive tour operator named Kihachiro Aratake was scouting for new shark-watching locations when he stumbled upon it. Out of the blue gloom, a colossal structure emerged. It was a monolith of breathtaking scale, a series of immense tiered platforms rising from the seabed. He saw vast, flat terraces, towering vertical walls, and what appeared to be enormous steps carved with an unnerving degree of precision. It looked architectural. It looked like a pyramid, a ziggurat from a forgotten age, swallowed by the sea. He had found what is now known as the Yonaguni Monument, and in doing so, had opened a Pandora's box of historical controversy that challenges the very foundations of our ancient past. For mainstream science and geology, the explanation for this underwater anomaly is straightforward, elegant, and comfortably terrestrial. The official position is that the monument is an entirely natural formation. Geologists, most notably Dr. Robert Schoch of Boston University, have studied the site and concluded that it is a product of fundamental earth processes. The rock is a specific type of sandstone and mudstone from the Miocene epoch, known for its tendency to fracture cleanly along parallel bedding planes. The argument posits that millions of years of tectonic stress created a network of vertical and horizontal cracks throughout the rock mass. Then, for millennia, the notoriously strong ocean currents in the region acted like a relentless sculptor, scouring away weaker rock and widening these fractures. What we are left with, according to this view, is a breathtaking illusion. The sharp 90-degree angles are simply the result of intersecting vertical and horizontal fault lines.
The grand terraces are natural bedding planes, and the staircase-like features are just a classic example of natural, differential erosion. It is, in essence, a geofact, a trick of light, shadow, and geology that our pattern-seeking human minds mistake for intelligent design. It is a wonder, yes, but a wonder of nature, not of man. And yet, the deeper one looks, the more the simple geological explanation begins to fray. The comfort of a natural origin story is challenged by a cascade of details that, when viewed together, become profoundly unsettling. To accept the mainstream view is to accept a series of coincidences so improbable that they verge on the miraculous. But what if it's not a coincidence? The primary challenge is the sheer concentration of ordered geometry. While nature can produce straight lines and right angles, it rarely does so with such density and deliberation in a single location. The main western face of the monument is a nearly perfect vertical wall, rising over 25 meters from the seafloor. It is flanked by features that defy simple erosion. There is the loop road, a pathway that circumscates the base of the main structure, punctuated by what appeared to be drainage channels cut into the rock at regular intervals. Could currents really carve a road? Then there is the main terrace, a vast flat expanse at the top. On this terrace sits a feature that has become iconic of the mystery, the Turtle Rock. It is a formation that bears an uncanny and unmistakable resemblance to a giant sea turtle, a creature of immense mythological importance in ancient Asian cultures. Geologists dismiss it as pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar shapes and random patterns. But to stand before it, even in photographs, is to feel a powerful sense of intention.
The list of anomalies continues to grow. There are features that look like post holes drilled into the rock to support pillars that are long gone. There are two colossal rounded megaliths, known as the Twin Pillars, which seem to stand in alignment. Most compelling of all are the steps. One section of the monument forms a grand ceremonial-looking staircase rising up the side of the structure. The steps are too large for a modern human, but their symmetry and consistent rise and run are difficult to attribute to the random chaos of water erosion. Can geology alone truly account for such artistry? Can random chance create what looks so undeniably like a grand sacred plaza lost to the abyss? This is where the mainstream narrative ends, and a far more radical story begins. To the marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus, who has dived the site over 100 times, there is no question. He states unequivocally that Yonaguni is man-made. He claims to have identified not just a single monument, but a complex of 10 structures, including smaller satellite castles, a stadium, and a network of connecting roads. He points to what he believes are carved symbols, linear engravings, and even animal reliefs etched into the stone, now heavily eroded by time and water. If Professor Kimura is right, the implications are staggering beyond comprehension. For the Yonaguni monument to have been built by human hands, it must have existed above the waves, on dry land. Geologists have confirmed that the last time this region was above sea level was at the end of the last ice age, before the Great Glacial Melt. This means the structure would have to be, at minimum, 10,000 to 12,000 years old. Let that sink in. 10,000 years old. That is more than twice the age of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It predates the stone temples of Göbekli Tepe. It predates the rise of Sumer, Egypt, and every other first civilization in our history books by 5 millennia. It would mean that while the rest of humanity was supposedly living in scattered, primitive hunter-gatherer tribes, a highly advanced culture with knowledge of complex stonework and large-scale construction existed in what is now Japan. It would mean a civilization capable of creating a city of stone, and that we have absolutely no record of it. This is the forbidden chapter of archaeology,
The idea of an advanced antediluvian civilization has long been relegated to the realm of myth and esoteric legend. It is the story of Atlantis in the Atlantic and its lesser-known twin, the lost continent of Mu, or Lemuria, in the Pacific. For generations, these were considered nothing more than fanciful tales. But what if Yonaguni is the first tangible proof? The first ruin of a world lost beneath the floodwaters that marked the end of the Ice Age, an event recorded in over 500 flood myths from cultures all around the globe. It suggests a global slate wiped clean by a cataclysm, leaving behind only the most massive and mysterious of its structures as clues. The silent stones of Yonaguni offer us no easy answers. They sit in the deep, forcing upon us a profound choice: to accept the comfortable explanation of a geological quirk, a magnificent but meaningless accident of nature, or to entertain the unsettling possibility that a chapter of human history, a great maritime civilization, was not just lost to time, but was erased from our memory. If such a sophisticated culture could build a metropolis of stone and then vanish beneath the waves, leaving almost no trace, it begs a terrifying question. What other truths about our distant past, what other monumental achievements lie just beyond the veil of accepted history, waiting in the darkness to be brought back into the light?
Our journey is at an end, but the mystery has only just begun. We have walked among the silent pillars of a world that should not exist. We have stood on the sun-scorched earth of Turkey, where hunter-gatherers, 12,000 years ago, carved a celestial cathedral from the living rock at Göbekli Tepe, rewriting the first chapter of human history before the ink was even dry. We have felt the chill, thin air of the Andes, tracing our fingers over the impossible precision of Pumapunku's H-blocks and the seamless, colossal masonry of Sacsayhuaman. Stonework that seems less carved and more molded by a technology we cannot comprehend. We have stood in the shadow of giants in Lebanon, dwarfed by the 1,000-ton megaliths of Baalbek's foundation. A platform so immense, so utterly beyond the capacity of the Roman Empire that built upon it, that it begs the question of who or what laid the first stone. And we have drifted through the ghost-like canals of Nanmadol and peered into the deep blue off the coast of Japan, contemplating sunken cities and submerged structures that speak of a world before the waves rose. A world lost to a great forgetting. Each of these sites, on its own, is a profound enigma, a career-defining puzzle for any archaeologist. Mainstream history treats them as such, as isolated curiosities, unrelated data points on the vast map of our past. The accepted narrative is a simple one, and in its simplicity, it is comforting. It tells us that we, modern humanity, are the pinnacle of a long, slow, linear ascent from the simple stone tool to the tribal village, from the first planting of a seed to the birth of the city-state, from the bronze chisel to the skyscraper. It is a story of gradual, predictable progress, a story that places us firmly at the top of the pyramid of achievement. It is a good story, a logical one, but it is a story that is falling apart. The sites we have visited are not merely isolated anomalies. They are the discordant notes in a symphony that we are only now beginning to hear. They are the cracks in the very foundation of the story we tell ourselves. When you look at them not as separate mysteries, but as a collective body of evidence, a pattern begins to emerge. A terrifying, beautiful, and world-altering pattern. The standard model of history has no room for a 12,000-year-old temple built with astronomical precision by people who were supposedly nomadic hunter-gatherers. It has no explanation for the machine-like cuts and drill holes in the diorite stone of Pumapunku, cuts that defy the capabilities of a pre-industrial society. It cannot account for the logistics of quarrying, transporting, and lifting multiple 800-ton blocks at Baalbek, a feat that would strain even our most advanced 21st century technology. The official explanations begin to sound thin, hollow. We are told that millions of man-hours using primitive tools like stone hammers and copper chisels are the answer. We are asked to believe that log rollers and earthen ramps are sufficient to explain the placement of megaliths the size of locomotives, fitted together with a precision our own engineers would struggle to replicate. We are presented with a version of the past where our ancestors, with a fraction of our knowledge and none of our technology, somehow achieved the impossible. Again, and again, and again, all across the globe. Is it not more intellectually honest to admit that our model is broken? Is it not time to consider that these are not the works of primitive men, but the faint, lingering echoes of a forgotten chapter of the human story?